We are back here on the GSMC Football Podcast, and for
keep yourself in the loop of everything football on the Golden State Media Concepts Football Podcast. The latest news on and off the field, be it college football, Big Ten, SEC, Big 12, Pac-12, ACC to the NFL. We've got you covered. Listen to the Golden State Media Concepts Football Podcast.
And welcome everybody to another edition of the GSMC Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. As always, I'm your host, Kenneth Gruenfelder, and it's great to have you guys here on this Wednesday, August 21st. We have a lot to talk about on the show today. Before I get into that, just want to remind you guys, as always, to tip or donate, get your comments recognized. Make sure to hit the $ icon in the chat. We qualified for Super Chats, so your comment will be highlighted in the live broadcast. I will acknowledge it, and it just makes the show more lively between me and you guys, the viewers. And the alternative way to help out the show as well is also going to the link, gsmcpodcast.net. And like I said, like I've been saying, we appreciate your guys' viewership each and every day as we continue to put out content for you guys daily. So let's get into what we are going to discuss for today. So we are going to start off the show. We're going to talk about Brian Flores' response to Tua's comments. I know I went over that yesterday, and Brian Flores did have some comments on that, so I wanted to get into what he had to say. Then we'll talk about Tom Brady, talking about the development of young quarterbacks and his thoughts on that. We'll get into Arthur Smith, the offensive coordinator of the Steelers, get into some of his comments on why people shouldn't overreact to what they've been seeing in the preseason so far. We'll talk about the Chiefs. We'll talk about the not the no-look pass, but the behind-the-back pass that Mahomes had in this past preseason game against the Lions, and Andy Reid's reaction to that. And then we will continue with our second-to-last wide receiver group rankings. Today we will be covering the AFC South. So make sure to stick around for that at the end of the show. So let's get into the first topic, which is talking about Brian Flores and his comments on what Tua said about him. And of course, like I said, I covered that yesterday. So Tua's comments were pretty rough for Flores. And this is what he had to say on what Tua said. And he said, "Look, I'm human. That hit me in a way that I wouldn't say was positive. I've got to use that and say, how can I grow from that? How can I be better?" He also said, "I'm genuinely happy for his success. I wish Tua nothing but the best. Right now I'm focused on the 2024 Vikings." Because he did take over as the defensive coordinator for the Vikings last year. And the Vikings defense actually improved, because if you remember from 2022, they were not good. And their defense was really bad, and you get to the playoffs against the Giants, and Daniel Jones torched that defense. So, and that was kind of the reason why they lost. I mean, they had a really good offense that year, but the defense was not good. And Flores did a nice job last year for the Vikings. So, and he's going to have to do a really good job this year, too, if the Vikings are going to want to have any kind of a season, especially now with J.J. McCarthy being out. And Sam Darnold is going to be the starter moving forward. And, yeah, so that's what he said on Tua. And there was also some other comments in the article I have here on even Mac Jones. Michael Lombardi said, "I don't think Brian Flores was shy about telling Tua, hey, I should have picked Mac Jones. I don't think he was shy about telling him that. In fact, I know that he wasn't." And he said that on the GM Shuffle podcast. And he also said, "If I had knew you were going to be this bad, I would have picked Mac Jones." That's supposedly what he told the young quarterback. But, yeah, so, and I talked about this yesterday during that segment when I was going over it. is that coaches are going to have to, coaches got to learn to adapt. And at least in the press conference, Brian Flores is acknowledging that, maybe I could have did things differently. I'm going to learn from it. And that shows that, hey, I could take accountability when something like this comes up. And it was just a way to try to motivate Tua. That's how we got to look at it. I don't like to think that he did believe this with what he was saying. Now, if he really did believe it, he's probably going to keep that to himself, but yeah, it just it's like I said yesterday, players are going to respond differently. And we also did talk about it in the production meeting as well, that each player is going to be different. Each player has a different way of being coached. They'll respond differently. So you have to learn to coach players certain ways and other players different ways. And Brian Flores is one of those coaches that he would coach every player the same way. And that's why when I went over it yesterday, Tua said that there were other players that kind of were in the same boat as him with Brian Flores' coaching style. And that they didn't respond well to it. They believed what he was saying. When in reality, he really didn't believe it. He's just trying to get the most out of his players. So, and in the quotes, it seems like he realizes his wrongdoings and he's going to learn from that. And we'll see, if he ever gets another head coaching job because, obviously, he spent some time with the Steelers and now he's with the Vikings on their staff. So, who knows if he gets another coaching job, because I know, there was, that tenure in Miami didn't end well. So we'll have to wait and see. But, yeah, it just, it is interesting, that whole situation. And, how it is now with Miami. Mike McDaniel's, got a different philosophy. And Tua has benefited from that. And Tua has looked like a different player, has played better. Now, part of that is because of the personnel that he is surrounded by, but, it is reassuring for him that he's got a head coach that truly believes in him. Not to say that Brian Flores didn't believe in him, but to Tua, it didn't seem like he showed that with some of the things that were said towards him. So it is interesting, and I know I brought up Tom Brady yesterday, and how any kind of motivation would fuel him, or any reason to have a chip on his shoulder, he would, he would take advantage of that. If the coach tells him that they don't believe in him, he's going to want to prove him wrong. And that's what he did for 20 plus years. But players respond differently. And Brian Flores is part of a coaching tree that hasn't really been that successful. And, you look around, all these guys that have been head coaches, Josh McDaniels, Bill O'Brien, Joe Judge, Matt Patricia. I mean, it's all kind of ended the same way. They get their opportunities, but what if any of those teams really won that have been coached by those teams? Or coaches have been a part of those teams. I mean, Bill O'Brien had some good years in Houston. Made the playoffs a lot. He was probably the best one. But didn't amount to anything. He was a part of a 24-0 collapse against the Chiefs, and then the following year, that offseason, he trades one of the best receivers in the NFL at the time for a running back that had some really good years, first couple of years in the league, but was not the same player. And that kind of and then Houston fell apart. So you would think the Belichick coaching tree would be one of the best, but it's not really that great. And unfortunately, Brian Flores is a part of that. So, that's as a head coach. Like, some of these guys can be good coordinators. I mean, Josh McDaniels, for example. Josh McDaniels, I don't think is a bad offensive coordinator. Because, look, I know he had Tom Brady, but that first year with Mac Jones wasn't bad. Brian Flores, what he was able to do with the Vikings defense last year, they played better. So, like, as coordinators, some of these guys aren't that bad. Now, Matt Patricia with the Eagles defense, he didn't really help. But, like I said, some of these guys as coordinators, that's their spot. That's their role. Like, maybe head coach isn't for them. Now, obviously, if they have the opportunity, they're going to take it. Like, if Brian Flores gets another opportunity to be a head coach and it's the right situation, then maybe he takes that. And, he takes on a new philosophy and doesn't have that same approach that he had when he was with the Dolphins. There was a lot that went on over there in Miami. You had the tampering stuff. It's just there was a lot going on over there during his time. So, we'll see if he ever gets another opportunity. Right now, it doesn't seem like it, but had some interesting comments that I wanted to touch upon. So let me know what you guys think about what Brian Flores had to say. And with that, we are going to take our first break of the show. And then when we come back, we'll talk about Tom Brady, talking about the development of young quarterbacks, and, just his opinion on it. And I'll give you my opinion on what he had to say. So, with that being said, stick around, and we'll be right back here on the GSMC Football Podcast.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign.
I wanna be the greatest. Everybody on the fake shit. I look around and feel like everybody is the fakest. I make this every day and I'm impatient, hoping one day I blow up from the basement. Statement, the top is so vacant. I don't hear shit that I think is amazing. Waiting for my day when I'm playing sold out shows for 1,000 faces. Hey, give me that crown, get in my way and to be put down. It ain't your place, all this my town. If I want that shit, then I'll get it right now. I'm losing it, the noose it fits. I'm losing shit, a stupid myth. You choose to live or choose to dip. You choose to fight or lose your grip and lose a gift. Oh,
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind?
All right, and we are back here on the GSMC Football Podcast. And for the second part of the show, we are going to talk about Tom Brady and his recent comments on the development of young quarterbacks. Now, I believe I have done, I covered a similar topic to this with Brady, because I think I did one on him just talking about like the NFL as a whole and how it's not the same as it used to be because of all the rule changes and things like that. So this is what he had to say on the development of rookie quarterbacks. So he said, I think it's just a tragedy that we're forcing these rookies to play early. But the reality is the only reason why we are is because we've dumbed the game down, which has allowed them to play. He also said it used to be thought of at a higher level. We used to spend hours and hours in the off season, in training camp, trying to be a little bit better the next year. But I think what happens is it discourages the coaches from going to deep levels because they realize the players don't have the opportunity to go to a deep level. So they're just going to teach them where they're at. And he also said, 5 years at Michigan, I got to learn how to drop back pass, to read defenses, to read coverages, to be coached, to deal with winning games, to deal with playing in Columbus, Ohio, in front of 110,000 people. I had to learn from being 7th quarterback on the depth chart to moving up to 3rd to ultimately being a starter. I had to learn all those things in college. That was development. And I think that was the last thing he said in this article here. But also, I'm kind of battling a little, I don't even know what it is, cold or something. My little congested, so just bear with me if I sound like I'm like gonna cry or something, because that's the way it's coming off of right now. But yeah, just wanted to bring that to light if I sound a little weird today. But yeah, look, I don't disagree with what he says. Now, I don't know how to. I get what he's saying, but I feel like a lot of these quarterbacks, from day one they can start. If the quarterback looks ready, he's probably going to he's going to end up getting the starting job, and you see that with a bunch of the rookie quarterbacks now. Caleb Williams is going to start. Jane Daniels, Bo Nix looks like he's going to be the starter. Drake May, we'll have to wait and see. Michael Penix is not going to start right away. And kind of weird how they're handling him in the preseason, because he didn't play in this past preseason game. Now he's not playing in the finale. And on top of that, Kirk Cousins hasn't played in the preseason. So your top two quarterbacks are really not playing in the preseason. Now Michael Penix is going to be the backup quarterback, and he's not contributing. I don't know, but they have their reasoning. They don't want to see him get hurt, and he would be starting with the twos. So, but back with what Brady was saying, I mean, I get it, because also when I was reading this, I thought to myself, well, if you look at Patrick Mahomes, Patrick Mahomes had a comment about learning defenses when he was coming off of an MVP year, and he doesn't even know how to read coverages. And this was his first couple years in the league, and you saw what he could do his first year, and you're like as the full-time starter, and you're like, wow, this guy's unbelievable. But he doesn't even know how to read defense yet. It's a different world, and Tom Brady is used to just like I said in the last segment. He always had a chip on his shoulder. He always wanted to prove someone wrong. He always wanted to prove himself. And not to say that the guys in the league don't want to do that now, but he had that different mentality. And that's why he was so successful for so long. And I don't know. I think for the most part, like if teams know their guy isn't ready to start from day one, then they're not going to start him. I mean, a lot of times teams will bring in a veteran backup, a veteran to be the backup, and maybe they'll start. Like, Marcus Mariota, who's on the Commanders now. I mean, he's kind of bounced around a little bit. He was with when he was with the Falcons. They had Desmond Ridder. Oh, obviously Desmond Ridder didn't turn out the way the Falcons were hoping for. That's why he's no longer there. But you had Marcus Mariota start, and then eventually Desmond Ridder took over. I mean, I'm trying to think of other situations as well where they didn't start right away, the rookie quarterbacks, but they came into the game eventually. I mean, because I know you have guys that sit for a while, like sit for a year, like Mahomes sat for a year, and then he came in. We'll see what the Patriots end up doing. Will Drake May start right away? Because I mean, he has played really well, but in the preseason he has looked good. But are they still going to opt to go with the veteran in Jacoby Brissett? That's still that's still up in the air. But Bo Nix is going to start. Well, I shouldn't say that, but it seems like they're leaning towards it. Caleb Williams, Jane Daniels, they're going to start. But what's the best way to develop a young quarterback? I mean, it depends on what the situation is. Because a lot of times you're going to draft a young quarterback to start day one. I mean, because they're your franchise guy. But then there's other times like, you'll have them sit for a little bit. Like, look at the Packers with Jordan Love. I mean, they eventually wanted him to take over, and he did. But sat behind Aaron Rodgers. Now, helped because Aaron Rodgers, won back-to-back MVPs and showed he's still got some good years left in him. And that, prevented Jordan Love from taking the field earlier. Because I do think that the Packers thought, Rodgers is, trending down. Now, after the 2 MVP seasons, he had one more season in Green Bay, and that was it. Then they went their separate ways. He goes to the Jets, and Jordan Love takes over. And, Jordan Love, it was a roller coaster of a season last year. But he eventually got it right. But that's a guy that's been in the league since, 2020. So, I understand what Brady's saying. It's a lot different than what it was 20 years ago. But that's just how it is now. And, I mean, we'll see what these young quarterbacks end up looking like this year. Because this has the potential to be a really good quarterback class. This one right here. Now, all of them are not going to start. I mean, obviously, J.J. McCarthy, unfortunately, he's going to be out. We'll see if Michael Penix gets any kind of playing time this year. It wouldn't really shock me. But we'll have to wait and see. So, but let me know what you guys think, though, what Brady had to say on the young quarterbacks here. and the developmental process. So before we go to break, just want to remind you guys again to tip or donate, get your comments recognized. Make sure to hit the $ icon in the chat. It'll be a super chat, so I will acknowledge it during the live broadcast. And it's just a great way to make the show more interactive between myself, the host, and you guys, the viewers. And the alternative way is also going to the link gsmcpodcast.net. But the super chat is easier because it doesn't, take you away from the video. You just stay with the video. And like I've been saying, we appreciate your guys' viewership each and every day. So make sure to continue that. We really appreciate it. So when we come back from our next break, we will talk about Arthur Smith and his comments on the Steelers offense, because the Steelers offense has been struggling this preseason. So we'll get into that and just kind of talk about what he had to say. So make sure to stick around, and we'll be right back here on the GSMC Football Podcast.
Looking for your daily fix of sports talk without having to pay for it? GSMC Sports Network is available on YouTube. Just search GSMC Sports Network. Get your fix of daily sports talk shows on YouTube, absolutely free. NFL, college football, NBA, MLB, MMA, UFC, fantasy football, and so much more. GSMC Sports Network has shows running all day long, with new sports shows starting every 2 hours. Just like on your favorite cable sports channel, except GSMC Sports Network is absolutely free. Just search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube to catch one of your new favorite shows, like the GSMC College Football Podcast, Chip Shot Football Podcast, Hoops and Heels Women's Sports Podcast, GSMC Basketball Podcast, and so many more. Check it out for yourself. GSMC Sports Network, now available on YouTube absolutely free. Search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube right now.
All right, and we are back here on the GSMC Football Podcast. And for the third part of the show, we're going to talk about Arthur Smith and his take on the Steelers offense. So I know I talked about, how the quarterbacks have played in the preseason, and it hasn't been great. And Arthur Smith, of course, is the new offensive coordinator. He took over. He's taken over this year. Last year, of course, the Steelers offense, the fans complained about it because of Matt Canada. And eventually, they got their wish, and he ended up leaving. They ended up parting ways with him. And now this year you bring in Arthur Smith, you change the quarterback room up completely. And, yeah, so far it hasn't been great. Now it is the preseason. And Arthur Smith, like I said, I wanted to get into what he had to say because he had some comments on, the reactions to how the offense has been playing. So this is what he said about the offense. He said, "We need to evaluate players, and so sometimes it gets distorted, good or bad. Preseason could distort reality, good or bad. We've all seen it." And he also said, that's not their standard and that's not acceptable, but at the same time, you'd rather go through that now than have that happen week one. There's a lot going on there. We've had a really good camp, but the reality is when we've got in there in the lights, we found a way to, and this is taking nothing away from the other defense. But we ought to get out of our own way. Those are the things we have to clean up. Because, yeah, the offensive line hasn't been great. Russell Wilson got sacked 3 times in his preseason debut. And, Justin Fields hasn't really looked great. Honestly, the you could argue that the quarterback that's looked the best so far is Kyle Allen. Because Kyle Allen actually threw a touchdown pass. These two guys haven't done that yet. So maybe Kyle Allen should be the starter. No. But Kyle Allen also has a interception as well. But I mean, Arthur Smith can say that, but Steeler fans and football fans all around are going to say, well, the reality is what it is, and that's that the Steelers' offensive line has not been good. And you got two quarterbacks that got something to prove here. Justin Fields being traded from the Bears to the Steelers. He's got something to prove. That he wants to prove that the Bears made a mistake, I'm sure, of trading him. And Russell Wilson, I'm sure he's got something to prove. But Russell Wilson has not looked like how he did in Seattle for quite some time now. And it just seems like the part of his game that made him so dangerous, and that's, scrambling and pulling off these off-scripted plays, it's not there anymore. And part of that is because he's, getting older. He's in his mid-30s. But it's just not there. Now, he didn't have a bad season with Denver last year. Having Sean Payton there, helped out a little bit. But even Sean Payton didn't want him. So now he ends up on Pittsburgh. And look, it's just one game. But already he's also dealing with a calf injury, which seems like he's shaking that off. But right now it just doesn't look great for this offense. And when we get to that first game and the Steelers' offense just is not looking good, fans are going to jump on that opportunity to rip Arthur Smith, to rip the quarterback. It's going to happen because it happened last year. And it could very well happen again. And, you also got, guys dealing with injuries on the offensive line, but also in the running game as well. Jaylen Warren is dealing with a hamstring injury, and he could, maybe miss the season opener. And he's, one of their weapons. He played well last year. And you lose him, and, your running game takes a big hit. So, and the Steelers, they got a great defense. Got a very good head coach who I think some people probably looking for the Steelers to maybe make a change there. Because, look, as much as we, praise Mike Tomlin for not having a losing season, Steeler fans want playoff wins. They don't want to settle. They want playoff success. And that's something that they have not had in a very long time. They haven't. They haven't won a playoff game in 8 years. Going on, 9 years. That's unacceptable. Now, this is the big picture. We're going into the third preseason game. And you could say, well, there's going to be a lot of teams that are going to be playing sloppy to start the year. And the Steelers could be one of those teams, but it's not like everybody's going to be, crisp and, in sync right away. It takes some time. And even when they had the full preseason with the 4 games, there were still teams that, that needed some time to get going. Now, you don't want to take too long, and you want to try to figure things out while also winning games because, once we get to like week 2 and, teams start off 0-2, then you hear all the playoff scenarios like, when these teams start 0-2, when teams start 0-2, they have, they are this likely to make the playoffs. And it'll be some random number. So for the Steelers, like, your offense is struggling, but you could try to work through it as long as you're, staying afloat and winning games. And despite the Steelers' offensive struggles last year, team still ended up winning 10 games and making the playoffs. And that was with Kenny Pickett and Mitchell Trubisky and Mason Rudolph all playing. And Mason Rudolph looked like the best quarterback out of the three. I mean, he proved me wrong because when they went to him, I said, well, I don't think he's going to be any better than what they already have. But no, it worked. So I give him a lot of credit, and now he's on the Titans. Also, Kenny Pickett in the preseason, he's not looked great. Has not looked great. And it's possible that he could end up being the quarterback 3. But I think Nick Sirianni was saying that he's still going to be the 2. But he has not looked good in the preseason. But I said this on a previous show, though. The Steelers they're not committed to these 2 guys that you see here long term. If it ends up not working out, they're both gone. But now you'd be in a situation where you have this good roster, but you don't have a quarterback. And the Steelers are not a team I don't think is going to look to rebuild. They want to be in it. They want to compete. And if they're looking for a quarterback with, the defense that they have, and you got George Pickens, you got a couple of good running backs, an offensive line that you hope is going to come together and be a solid unit. And after this year, it doesn't work out with these 2 guys, and you're looking for a quarterback. Unless you go in and Dak Prescott's available and you pay him $55 million, but I don't think that's gonna. I don't know. The Steelers have the ability to do that. I mean, they have to rework some stuff with their cap, but again, that's just a hypothetical. That's for all we know, Dak could stay in Dallas because there were positive signs coming out of Dallas that maybe they could be moving towards a deal there. I don't know. But look, I get it. Back to what Arthur Smith said, though. I get what he's saying. I feel like I keep saying that. I understand why he's saying that because, again, it is the preseason. Obviously, things are not always going to look great. But this is a team that for the last several years, their offense has not been great. There was a stat that there was a tweet that was sent out about the Steelers' offense. The last year that Ben Roethlisberger and Antonio Brown were together, the Steelers' offense was ranked. I don't know. It was at least ranked in the top 10. I think the top 5, but was definitely a top 10 offense. But then since then they were like bottom 5, bottom 7. Because 2019, Ben gets hurt. 2020, actually, the Steelers got off to a good start. But, they kind of fell flat towards the end. And then you had Ben's last year. The Steelers' offense wasn't great. But they still managed to make the playoffs. And in the last couple of years, it hasn't been, with Kenny Pickett, they ended up finishing with winning records, of course, these last 2 years and made the playoffs. But, again, the offense wasn't great. What has been the strength of the team? The defense. It's been the strength of the team. So, yeah, we'll see. I mean, let me know what you guys think, though, about Arthur Smith's comments. Does he have a point, or do you think the Steelers' offense is really going to be a problem when we get to the start of the season? Now, they're going up against the Falcons, which I think is a winnable game for both teams. The Falcons, I think, are going to be a good team, but, Kirk Cousins hasn't played in a long time, and the Steelers' defense could take advantage of that, take advantage of the rust, and maybe the Steelers' defense, that's a game they take over and they can get the win there. And then you go from there. So, but yeah, let me know what you guys think, though, in the comments. So, We're going to take our next break. When we come back, we'll talk about Patrick Mahomes' behind-the-back pass, just Andy Reid's reaction on it. So make sure to stick around once again, and we'll be right back here on the GSMC Football Podcast.
For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found.
All right, and we are back here on the GSMC Football Podcast, and for the fourth part of the show, we are going to talk about Andy Reid's reaction to Patrick Mahomes' no-look, I keep saying no-look, behind-the-back pass. Now, I did want to acknowledge some comments from our regular viewer, and that's Anthony Manzano, and he says, as a Dolphins fan, I've always said this. Brian Flores was the right coach at the wrong time. He's the type of first-year coach that you hire when the team has established itself. That is a good point there. And then he also said Flores comes from the Bill Belichick coaching tree. It's very militaristic. He has a very high standard for his coaches, and I think that's what was trying to do in Miami. Yeah, no, I agree. The Dolphins, I mean, he was part of the, tank for Tua stuff. So you did have Ryan Fitzpatrick who was starting there. But, yeah, the Dolphins are a young team and had a young quarterback. And, yeah, maybe in a setting where, like you said, Anthony, that it's a more established team, that style maybe would have been better as opposed to a team that's just trying to get themselves started and establishing themselves. So I do agree with that. But that's, and Brian Flores acknowledged that he's trying to learn from his mistakes. So if he does, in fact, get another opportunity to be head coach, how will he approach things? Is he going to coach different players in different ways? But anyways, let's get back to now the Chiefs. So Patrick Mahomes performed a around-the-back pass during the preseason game against the Lions. And this is what Andy Reid had to say. He said, I heard he blamed Kelsey for the broken play, but that's all right. Does it in practice every day, and I'm all right as long as it's a completion. Listen, they do it in basketball every game, several times in every game. It's not that big of a deal behind the back. I don't think I've seen it before in a game, but I see it every day in practice. Here's my take. Do not perform it in an actual game. I don't care who it is. I don't care that it's Patrick Mahomes doing it. Look, the no-look pass is one thing. I mean, the around the back is, look, I try to do that when I'm playing, water pong, we'll say water pong, and I am terrible at it when I have to do the around the back. I think there was one time I actually did make it in a cup, but I'm terrible with that. I just feel like there's so many things that could go wrong with that. Like, you have to be absolutely sure that you are going to complete this play. Now, Andy Reid said, as long as it's completion, it doesn't matter. But are you really going to attempt that in the game? Now, if the Chiefs are up by, if they're winning like 31-7, and Mahomes wants to do that, now I don't know why you'd want to do that, because you're just showing off at that point. Then by all means, I guess that's when you could do it. But I would say, like, if, maybe towards the beginning of the game, but like if you're in a tight game and you can't make mistakes here, you shouldn't do that. Now, again, I'm not in the mind of Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs. I don't know what, their thought process is on it. But I'd be like, no. Please do not do that in the game. Because you could have, like a defensive lineman, like, blow up a play, and Mahomes is, trying that out. And, what if it gets picked off or something? And you got, one of the big defensive linemen running down the field with the ball. I don't know. I mean, I feel like the Chiefs, they're going to be smart with it. But, and will it shock me if it is performed in a game? No. Because we see the Chiefs do all these kinds of, ridiculous formations. Like, they had the merry-go-round a couple years ago against the Raiders. They had that formation in the Super Bowl against the Niners the first time, where it was a direct snap, and they spun around. A couple of them spun around. If you guys know what I'm talking about, I think it was right before the first Chiefs touchdown in that Super Bowl. Again, that was like, going on 5 years ago. So, almost. But it's funny, but again, you don't want this negatively impacting your team, and it ends up being a play that costs you a game. Now, I think if that ended up happening, Andy Reid's got to shut it down. Say, no, we're not doing this again. But I don't know. Part of me thinks like the Chiefs will be smart about it, but I don't know. I don't. You don't want to see this being performed in a game. I just don't think it's the right thing to do, because so many things could go wrong. And we last year on offense, the Chiefs struggled. I mean, I go back to that game against the Raiders on Christmas, and that first touchdown that the Raiders had, there was like miscommunication on the handoff, and the Raiders, took that in for a touchdown. I don't know. I just see like a mistake happening if that's performed in a game. Now, it's cool because like if he completes that in a regular season game, you're going to see that all over social media. You're going to see that. But it just should not be done in an actual game. Preseason's one thing, regular season's another. And definitely don't want to see that in a playoff game. But who am I to say that? Anthony says, I think Patrick Mahomes is probably the only quarterback that can get away with that behind the back pass because of style of football. I agree. And the way he plays the position is sandlot football. Yeah. I mean, look, it's just he makes the game look easy. He does. And that's what makes him the best right now. Especially with the amount of winning that the Chiefs have done in a short period of time. Now, I thought it was interesting because I forget who said it. But I did see a video recently, and it was someone saying that that Patrick Mahomes will never win another Super Bowl. That's it. And I thought to myself, that's ridiculous. Now, you could go back and you can say, well, Tom Brady went 10 years in between, his third Super Bowl and his fourth Super Bowl. You could talk about how Aaron Rodgers and Drew Brees, they won their Super Bowls, and they're one and only Super Bowls, and they never won anything after that. But I don't know. I mean, I get it because they were saying, well, Travis Kelce is not going to be playing forever. Andy Reid's not going to be his coach forever. At some point, they're going to, leave it. And it's going to be up to him, which I get. But I don't know. I just feel like he could definitely get to 6. He could definitely get to 6. But even if he doesn't, I think he has at least one more Super Bowl that he'll win in his career. I'm not going to say he's not going to win any. Because I just think right now, like, he is well ahead of the rest of the pack. Right now. So I just think he's winning more Super Bowls. Anthony also said in the chat, Patrick Mahomes is starting to get the Aaron Rodgers mentality where he doesn't have the patience to wait for his young receivers to develop because he's in his prime and wants to win one more Super Bowl. I mean, look, I mean, he's got a couple of young receivers that he's got to work with. You know, like Rashid Rice is going into his second year. Although we got to see what happens if he ends up getting suspended. It doesn't look like it with what happened with him this offseason. But also you got Xavier Worthy, who they drafted. You know, and the veteran receiver that they did bring in, Marquise Brown, he's hurt. So Patrick Mahomes is going to have to work with these young receivers that he's got. You know, Xavier Worthy looks like he could be, I mean, not the next Tyreek Hill, but, you know, similar style with his speed. I mean, we're going to see those explosive plays back in this offense, which we have not seen in quite a while. That's their intention. But I don't think he doesn't have patience. I think he does have the patience. I think Aaron Rodgers, like, if you go back to Aaron Rodgers' last season in Green Bay, well, you know, Aaron Rodgers is in his late 30s. And, you know, there's no more Devontae Adams. You got Christian Watson. You got Romeo Doubs. You got to get on the same page as them. But you're in your last couple of years in the league. You're on the back nine. Mahomes is still towards the beginning of his career. Well, now he's getting to the middle part of his career. But it's a little bit different. And I don't know. I think Mahomes and Rodgers, I think, different personalities. So I don't know. I don't know if I necessarily agree with that. I mean, obviously, last year, I mean, you saw Mahomes and him losing patience on the sidelines with Kadarius Toney. But I don't know. I mean, and Mahomes has 3 Super Bowls. Rodgers only has 1. Which, it's a shame. It's a shame that Rodgers only has 1. Because I think, you know, with the amount of MVPs he's won and just the player that he's been, the fact he's only had 1 Super Bowl is just, you know, it's the same thing with Breeze, too. Those guys both should have won more, but they didn't. And Mahomes has already passed him in Super Bowls. And now he's going for Brady. He's got a long way to go, and he might not ever catch him. Most people are going to say he's not going to catch him, but he's got a chance to. He's got plenty of time left. But look, just continue to do that. Just play the game, as cliche as it sounds, just play the game the right way. You know, you don't have to try out these crazy gadget plays, these flashy plays, trick plays that... Now, obviously, like, there's some that, you know, you can get away with, but I don't know. The behind the back, I just feel like there's so much risk that could go into that. But, I mean, it's Patrick Mahomes, so I guess, you know, if it's anybody that's going to do it, it's him. But I don't know. If I was one of the coaches, I'd be like, please do not do that in an actual game. Please do not do that. But I think if it is performed in a game and it gets blown up and something bad happens, like if there's like a return for a pick 6 or something, or if the Chiefs end up losing the game because of it, you will never see it again. But we'll see. I mean, we'll keep an eye on the Chiefs games this year and see if this is actually performed during a game, an actual regular season game. And if it isn't, I guess it was only happening during preseason games and practice. But I won't be surprised if we do see it. I just think don't do it because it's got disaster written all over it, in my opinion. But let me know what you guys think, though, about that. Should Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs perform this in a game, or do you think that they should say, you know what, it's cute, it's funny to do it in the preseason, but yeah, maybe we shouldn't do it in a real game, because it's just, again, there is a risk factor there, and I really don't think they should do that in a real game, because I just there are so many things that could go wrong, and I just don't think it's worth doing. So that's my opinion on it. Let me know what you guys think, though, about it in the comments. So we are going to take our final break of the show, and then when we come back, we will get back to our receiver rankings, receiver group rankings. So we'll be covering the AFC South, and this one was kind of a tough one to rank, and we'll get into why that is when we come back from our final break of the show. So, with that being said, for one final time today, stick around, and we'll be right back here on the GSMC Football Podcast. All right, and we are back here on the GSMC Football Podcast, and for the final part of the show, we are now going to rank the wide receiver groups for the teams in the AFC South. So this is our second to last rankings that we will be doing. So let's get into that and switch a couple things around here. Now, this division I feel like was a little difficult because, I don't know, because the top spot, I think for me, is pretty easy. But it's like the other three, because when you look at the Colts, you know, they got a lot of young receivers. They got Michael Pittman, obviously, who got paid this offseason. With the Titans, you got a bunch of veterans with DeAndre Hopkins, who's actually, you know, who knows if he's going to be back for week 1. But, you know, you have him, Ridley, who they brought in, Tyler Boyd. And I know I've said this multiple times, but they do. I mean, if this receiving core was from 2019, you know, this would be arguably the best receiving core in the NFL. But that's not the case. And then you got the Jaguars, who they got a young receiver in Brian Thomas Jr., who they drafted from LSU. You also got Christian Kirk, but there's no more Ridley. Zay Jones is now with the Cardinals. They did bring in Gabe Davis, who, again, many people thought he was going to take that next step after that playoff game against the Chiefs, but that just never materialized. But yeah, that's kind of where we're at. Although, another receiver, too, that's been turning some heads is Parker Washington. This preseason, he has 4 receptions for 48 yards and a touchdown. Supposedly he's looking really good, so I guess that's someone to keep an eye on. Maybe takes on more of a role this year. But yeah, Christian Kirk was a guy that they gave a lot of money to, and the first year, like, you know, played well. Last year dealt with a lot of injuries. You know, missed some time I shouldn't say a lot of injuries, but yeah, missed some time. He only played in 12 games last year. He had 3 touchdowns. The year before that, he had 1,108 receiving yards and 8 touchdowns. So the Jags are kind of hoping that, he's back to how he was in 2022. Gabe Davis, could be that third receiver, and then you got Brian Thomas Jr., who could be a stud coming out of the draft. And then for the Texans, I mean, look, Tank Dell scored a touchdown this preseason. Nico Collins got paid. They brought in Stephon Diggs. The Texans are going to be a really good team this year. And part of the reason for that is their pass catchers, their wide receivers. So how to go about this ranking? It's really tough, again, like especially looking at the other 3 teams. For me, I was kind of like going back and forth between the Titans and the Jaguars. And I don't know. I kind of came to the conclusion of just ranking the Titans slightly ahead of the Jags. Putting the Jags last at the moment. Because, I don't know. Christian Kirk coming off of an injury. Gabe Davis, he dealt with a ton of injuries last year. Brian Thomas Jr. coming in as a rookie. Now, could he turn out to be a stud? Absolutely. But you kind of know what you're getting with the receivers with the Titans. They're 3 veterans, which, look, their best years are all behind them. But, Calvin Ridley's coming off of a 1,000-yard season. Despite missing basically 2 years of football, being out of football for 2 years. I think DeAndre Hopkins had 1,000 yards last year. Yeah, he did. 1,057 receiving yards and 7 touchdowns. And then you got Tyler Boyd, who's, still a solid receiver. But, again, they're all in that, 30 range in terms of age. But I feel like they're still going to be productive, I think. Just not up to the level of, where they were at a few years ago when they were all number 1 receivers for their teams. Even Tyler Boyd. Because, that was before Jamar Chase and T. Higgins got there. Calvin Ridley was, with the Falcons, they still had Julio Jones, but Calvin Ridley was kind of like that 1B to his 1A. And then DeAndre Hopkins, of course. He was the number 1 receiver with Houston, and then he was the number 1 receiver with the Cardinals. So, I'm going to give them that respect and put them ahead of the Jaguars. And then you got the Colts. And they got young receivers on this team. And like I said, Michael Pittman, he got paid this offseason, and he's been a productive receiver for them. Last year, he had a career high in receiving yards, a career high in receptions, had 4 touchdowns, and, obviously started out with Anthony Richardson, and then he got hurt, and you had Gardner Minshew starting, the majority of the games. He finished with 109 receptions, 1,152 receiving yards. And like I said, got paid this offseason. And he's the number 1 receiver on this team. So I'm curious to see how he ends up doing with Anthony Richardson over the course of a full season. And also, you got to factor in, Jonathan Taylor is going to be back the whole year. So, the Colt and with Anthony Richardson as well. And those guys are going to be running the football. We talked about Lamar Jackson and Derrick Henry in the same backfield. Now you got Anthony Richardson and Jonathan Taylor in the same backfield. That's going to be a lot of fun to watch if they can play a full season together, because that'll give opposing defenses fits. But then also other receivers, you got Josh Downs. Last year, 68 receptions, 771 receiving yards, and 2 touchdowns. So, not bad for his rookie season. And then they also drafted another receiver as well in Adonai Mitchell. And they have Alec Pierce as well. Just wanted to take a look at Donnie Mitchell's stats. So far this preseason, he only has 1 reception for 11 yards. But out of Texas, I wanted to look at, his stats. So, he's coming off of a season in Texas, 51 receptions, 813 receiving yards, 10 touchdowns. And that's your third receiver. And spent some time at Georgia as well. But Texas was, his last year in college. That year at Texas, that was a good year for him. 10 receiving touchdowns. So, the Colts got a good young receiving core. He's 21. Josh Downs is got to pull up his profile again now. Mitchell's 21. Josh Downs, of course, if this wants to load. Josh Downs is 23, and I think Michael Pittman is, what is he, 20? He's 26. So they got a young receiving core. And let's see how it is now with Anthony Richardson over the full season. You still got Alec Pierce there as well, I guess, who's the number 4 now. But I'm going to put them 2 over the veterans and over the Jags. And then at 1, it's no surprise it's the Texans. You got Stephon Diggs now. Nico Collins is coming off his best year. Tank Dell was an explosive weapon for them last year. And like I said, already scored a touchdown in the preseason. So, there's a lot to like about this Texans receiving core. And then you also got some other guys, Noah Brown and Robert Woods, John Mechie. We'll see how the final roster is constructed with those last 3 receiver spots, because they got a ton of receivers that are trying to make the team and get those last few spots there. So, but I like the Texans at 1. I just think they got the best receiving core by far. That one is, well, I don't want to say by far, but they do have the best receiving core in this division. The other 3, it's, we'll see how it goes. But that's how I would rank it. So to go through it again, I got the Jags at 4, the Titans at 3, the Colts at 2, and the Texans at 1. So tomorrow we will cover the receivers in AFC West, and then it'll probably be the last rankings that we do before the season starts. I also wanted to bring up, I was looking at Instagram during one of the breaks, and so Pete Carroll is going to be teaching classes at USC. So I thought that was interesting, and I think I still have the post open. I hope I do. Yeah, I do. Oh, no, it just went away now. Let me see if I could find it. I think ESPN posted it. Yeah, so he's returning to USC as a teacher. He said, I'm not desiring it at this point. This is on coaching. Not desiring it at this point. This isn't the coaching season. I'm not waiting on it at all. I'm going ahead. I've got other things that I want to do that I'm excited about, and I'm going to see how that all goes. So we'll see what happens. Is that it for him? Is he going to try to come back and coach? I feel like I don't think the door is completely closed. Doesn't seem like the door is completely closed on Pete Carroll, but you never know. Him and Bill Belichick are not, they're getting older, of course. I know. I didn't want to say. I was going to say like spring chickens. They're not spring chickens, but I said it anyways. But yeah, they want to do other things. They've been doing this. Well, Pete Carroll wants to do other things. Belichick wants to keep coaching, and Pete Carroll, I think part of him still wants to coach, but maybe he's just gonna take some time, do other things, and then if the opportunity presents itself and he misses it, then he can come back. So we will see. But let me know what you guys think though about my rankings for the AFC South, the wide receiver group rankings, and yeah, that is all the time that we have for today. Thank you guys for tuning in and bearing with me. So I'm trying to shake off whatever I got going on here, allergies. It happens. But yeah, make sure to check out all the other shows. We greatly appreciate your guys' viewership each and every day. Anthony, appreciate the comments as always in the chat. And yeah, so Until then, I'm Kenneth Gruenfelder signing off from the GSMC Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. Have a good day, and I will talk to you guys tomorrow. Take care.
Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day. Yeah, I'm tired of shit, and the coffee ain't hit yet, damn ain't that